I really don't, because you're talking about two very different issues. If you look at the indictments of President Trump, you're talking about novel legal theories, never been tried before, where they tried to basically push a square peg into a round pole to try to get the top Republican in the United States, the nominee for the president of the United States, and Donald J. Trump. Versus what appears to be, according to the allegations against Eric Adams, a very deep and massive campaign finance violation, where they were bringing wire fraud charges, etc. The very scheme is very different altogether. They're using tried and true criminal charges against the mayor of New York versus these insane novel legal theories trying to criminalize Donald Trump. They are very two things, and I could go step by step with you through every one of these indictments, but the two are not the same. And I think we got to be careful not to try to make it seem as that now the Department of Justice is operating with clean hands all the time. What we have seen on Capitol Hill is that that is not the case.
Well, Congressman, as we consider the difference in these cases here, I was just speaking with one of your Republican colleagues from New York, Nicole Malliotakis, who was talking about how, frankly, city leadership just doesn't need this distraction because the city needs to run. And it's at that point I would point out that many of these cases against Donald Trump have not been wrapped up yet. In fact, he hasn't been sentenced in the case in which he was actually convicted. Why should New Yorkers worry about the distraction of having to fight a legal battle on the part of the New York City mayor, but not worry about the distractions that could face a president of the United States?
Well, this is a great question, and let me unfold that. Number one, the charges that have been brought, in my view, ridiculously against Donald Trump will have no bearing whatsoever on his ability to run the United States of America. Why would I say that? Number one, these charges that were brought around Mar-a-Lago documents, the same stuff could have been charged against Joe Biden. The Department of Justice did not charge Joe Biden. And the reason why they didn't do that is because they said he was a well-meaning old man. He was facing the same investigation. I would say Joe Biden's done a terrible job, but it's not stopped him from doing his job. When it comes to Eric Adams in New York, and this is why I'm saying it's important that you cannot try to create some moral equivalency between these two situations. What Eric Adams apparently is facing is dealing with major campaign finance violations. And I mean major to the tunes of tens of millions of dollars from overseas. Very different matter than the ridiculous indictments brought to us by Jack Smith, Merrick Garland, the ridiculous RICO charges down in Georgia that make no sense at all, and obviously what happened in Lower Manhattan, where they had to reach into the past for something that the Federal Election Commission even said there was no there in New York. They basically tried to make a crime that did not exist. That's wrong, and that's not going to stop Donald Trump from being able to lead our country and get our country back on track and making America great again.
Congressman, I'd like to ask you about the business of your chamber as well, as we find you on Capitol Hill today, having yesterday, of course, seen the House and the Senate pass a 3-month continuing resolution to keep the government funded until December 20th. I understand you were a no on that bill, and I wonder what you make of the way Speaker Johnson handled all of this, knowing his original plan for a 6-month CR with the SAVE Act attached didn't make it through. He had to go with this clean CR plan B. Does he deserve to be Speaker again if the House is able to maintain, the Republicans, that is, the majority?
Well, look, I think the first answer to your core question is yes. Mike Johnson's in a tough spot. It's been a very difficult Congress to navigate. I will add that one of the reasons we are at this point here on Capitol Hill is because Chuck Schumer, Senate Democrats, and the White House have done nothing with respect to trying to find common sense solutions to funding the government going forward. In the House, under the leadership of Mike Johnson, we passed 5 of the 12 appropriation bills, which fund 73% of the government. What did the Senate do? I will tell you what the Senate did under Chuck Schumer's leadership. They did nothing. They did no homework. They passed no bills. They came with no solutions. They didn't even try to work on this over the summer months. They basically sat in the Senate and just waited to the last minute, which is typical of Washington, D.C., to wait to the last minute so you're forced to deal with some massive bill to avoid a shutdown, which I did vote against because I don't believe we should be doing that right now. But then you set up a situation where you go into a Christmas omnibus that nobody reads. It is the same song and dance in Washington, D.C. That's at the feet of Chuck Schumer and Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, because they've had months to come to an agreement with House Republicans on federal spending. They have chosen not to. So I think what people really need to understand is that it's a difficult situation, whether it was Mike Johnson or Kevin McCarthy or Paul Ryan or John Boehner or any other Republican speaker, because the truth on Capitol Hill is that Senate Democrats and House Democrats, for that matter, do not want to negotiate spending in an orderly manner where people can come to compromise. They want to wait for the last minute where you're dealing with a take it or leave it deal, and you have members on Capitol Hill who don't want the American people to be left in the lurch. It is an indictment of the process here. Democrats need to step up and do their job for once.
And of course, we all have questions as to whether or not the deal that former Speaker Kevin McCarthy, who you just mentioned, and the deal he did strike with Democrats will stand ultimately at the end of the day, especially that side deal we have all heard so much about. I'd like to ask you as well, Congressman, about what's happening in the Capitol today. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky is there visiting with some of your colleagues before he meets with Biden and Harris later this afternoon. Many of your Republican colleagues have had criticism for Zelensky with some of the comments he has made about Donald Trump while here in the U.S. in the last week, as well as a visit to Pennsylvania, and specifically a plant that is making ammunition that is helping Ukraine in this war. Mike Johnson, the speaker, did call for the firing of the Ukrainian ambassador to the U.S. over that visit. What is your thought on all of this?
I agree with Mike Johnson, and here's why. You now have a foreign leader who's now making plant visits in one of the key battleground states in our presidential election. Vladimir Zelensky is now talking tough or talking badly about Donald Trump, and he's here. Obviously, he's going to have meetings with the president and members on Capitol Hill. But that stop in Pennsylvania was highly political in the middle of a presidential election. You know, the Democrats would lecture us about foreign influence in our elections. Well, what demonstrates foreign influence any more than the leader of a foreign nation touring a facility in a battleground state 40 days before a presidential election? This is outrageous. But I just want to be very clear with your viewers. The reason why this is allowed to occur is because most of the media will not question Kamala Harris or Joe Biden. That's if Kamala Harris or Joe Biden are even available to answer your questions. And they have no problem taking whatever help they feel they need from anywhere around the globe to win an election. It is election interference. It is wrong. And that's why Mike Johnson has made his stance. I stand with him in that. And my colleagues on Capitol Hill, we need to be investigating this, because you can't have foreign leaders coming into our country laying down their markers of who should be the next commander-in-chief for our nation.
And finally, Congressman, with your district in mind, in our last minute with you, we all are obviously watching Hurricane Helene as well as it barrels toward Florida. Could be an incredibly strong storm. What does the state of Florida need in preparation and potentially in the aftermath? Is it not getting anything that it needs?
Well, look, I know our governor has been in contact with FEMA. They've already been working on this. In Florida, unfortunately, yes, we deal with hurricanes. Our leadership knows how to get this done. I know Governor DeSantis has already pre-positioned assets in key areas to respond to the aftermath of the storm. In my district, we were hit with Hurricane Ian 2 years ago. We worked with the governor of our state. We worked with FEMA and other partners to try to build back our area very quickly. Florida, unfortunately, is accustomed to this. We will get through it once again, and we'll be working with everybody to make sure that the people of Florida are restored and they get back on their feet as quickly as possible.